Welcome to my YouTube channel. This one mistake at the mint created a coin worth millions today, and the shocking part is that it happened in a year when most Americans never imagined a simple quarter could be anything more than spare change. The 1966 Washington quarter looks so normal that thousands of people have probably held one and never thought twice. And yet behind that familiar profile of George Washington lies a version so rare, so elusive, and so unbelievably valuable that a single specimen has been estimated at a staggering $94 million. Yes, $94 million for a quarter most people would have tossed into a vending machine without hesitation. And before you rush off to check your change drawer, stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll not only know what made this coin a legend, but you'll also get hints about the next unbelievable coin coming up after this. And trust me, you absolutely don't want to miss it, because what follows might leave you speechless in ways you never saw coming. Now let's step back to 1966, a time of economic transition and minting chaos. Silver had just been removed from most circulating coins, and the U.S. Mint was scrambling to meet demand while switching compositions. The result was a mix of experimental strikes, unusual planchet stock, and rushed production methods that opened the door for errors unlike anything before or after. And right in the center of that chaos was the Washington quarter, officially made of copper-nickel clad instead of the beloved silver used up to 1964. Collectors often assumed coins from this transitional era had little chance of becoming superstars. But that assumption was shattered when one breathtaking example surfaced with all the hallmarks of a once-in-a-lifetime mint blunder. Imagine a 1966 quarter accidentally struck on a leftover 90% silver planchet that should have been phased out 2 years earlier. Imagine that same coin struck twice, slightly off-center, creating a shadowed double image of Washington's profile and faint doubling on the date. Then picture the mint mistakenly polishing the dies in a way that gave the surfaces a proof-like shine, even though no official proofs were made at the time. That combination alone would make headlines. But the known mega-rarity reportedly had even more drama. Misaligned collar strike, unusually thick rim, and a faint mint error where the reverse eagle feathers appear ghosted due to low pressure in the second strike. Add to that the fact that very few transitional planchet quarters escaped the mint, and even fewer survived circulation unscathed, and you can start to see why one spectacular survivor has become the stuff of modern legend. Auction whispers tell of private offers reaching into 8 figures years ago. And when a serious collector confidentially insured his specimen for $94 million based on expert appraisals, the numismatic world could hardly believe it. Think about that. An unassuming coin most people wouldn't glance at twice now valued higher than entire collections, classic paintings, and even some celebrity mansions. And yet that's not the only twist. The 1966 quarter comes from a year with no mint marks, complicating tracing and authentication. And that mystery factor has only fueled interest because collectors know that the absence of a mint mark doesn't mean the absence of magic. Some of the most valuable transitional coins in American history carry no mint mark at all, making them invisible to anyone who doesn't know exactly what to look for. Maybe yours has slightly different coloration due to silver content. Maybe it has a thicker reeded edge. Maybe it rings differently when dropped on a table. Subtle signs can mean the difference between pocket change and generational wealth. And while the $94 million example is practically mythical in rarity, there may be others out there misidentified, forgotten in drawers, hidden in old coin jars, or sitting in collections that haven't been checked in decades. History tells us that accidental strikes on silver planchets did happen in the mid-1960s because the mint was still clearing leftover stock. And during the coin shortage of the era, they reused, mixed, and scrambled metals to keep up with demand. Mistakes were inevitable, and some of those mistakes escaped into circulation. Now imagine being the person who unknowingly spent one in the 70s or 80s on a cup of coffee. Collectors love telling stories of average people discovering treasures in change. Just like the person who spotted a dramatic die clash on a 1966 quarter tucked in a parking meter collection and sold it quietly for 6 figures. Or the janitor who found an off-center double strike sitting in a school donation jar. And every time one of those stories surfaces, it reminds people that these fortunes aren't always locked in museums or elite vaults. Your house could hold more wealth than you realize. But before I reveal how to spot the exact hallmarks of the record-breaking example, Let me tell you why collectors are willing to pay so much. The 1966 quarters were minted during a freeze on proof and mint sets, making high-quality specimens scarce even in normal form. Combine that with restricted mint markings and transitional chaos, and you get a perfect storm for rarity. Serious numismatists chase these coins because they represent a historical pivot and because any error from this year is automatically more desirable. Most transitional errors came from 1965, yet a handful of silver planchets lurked into 1966, and that tiny anomaly is what makes the silver-based error quarter one of the holy grails of modern coinage. Authentication requires weight checks, metal composition tests, and magnification to confirm doubling and collar errors. But if you ever hold one, your life could change in an instant. And even if yours isn't the exact spectacular $94 million specimen, near-miss versions have sold from tens of thousands to several million, depending on condition and error combination. Now here's the kicker. This isn't even the last mind-bending coin in today's lineup. After I finish walking you through every spine-tingling detail of this 1966 treasure, we're heading into another year and mint mark combination that collectors whisper about late at night. And believe me, the next coin has a story so bizarre and unexpected that even experts shake their heads in disbelief. So make sure you pay attention right till the end, because you don't want to just hear about one life-changing coin and miss the next. If you think the 1966 quarter is shocking, the next one takes things to an entirely different level. Now back to the treasure at hand. Let's break down how this legendary quarter came to be and how it may still be out there. During the mid-1960s, the Coinage Act had just stripped silver from most denominations, but the transition wasn't as clean as history books make it seem. Leftover planchets often sat in storage bins alongside new alloy blanks, leading to accidental strikes. Inspectors were overwhelmed and mint workers were under pressure to meet quotas, especially since the public was hoarding silver coins at an unprecedented rate. That hoarding frenzy meant demand for new coins hit record highs, and whenever speed takes priority, precision suffers. So imagine a day shift at the mint when a silver blank slipped into the press, got struck with 1966 dies, then misfed on a second strike, creating a slight misalignment and a rare doubled profile. No one noticed, no one stopped the presses, that coin dropped into a bin, mixed with thousands of clad quarters and rolled into a paper sleeve. It may have ended up in a bank, a casino, a grocery store, or a military base. Maybe someone used it in a laundromat or dropped it between couch cushions. Maybe it traveled across states before landing in a piggy bank. Then decades later, a sharp-eyed hobbyist spotted the unusual luster or weight and sent it to an appraiser. And when experts confirmed the error, its legend was born. And while that particular coin might have been secured away, others could remain unseen. Every year, collectors flock to coin shows with calipers, scales, and magnifying lamps, hoping to stumble upon overlooked transitional errors. And with technology today, even more people are learning the difference between clad and silver by sound and feel. Think about that the next time you handle a handful of quarters. You could be seconds away from discovering something worth more than your house. And remember, don't wander off, because after this story concludes, we're diving headfirst into another quarter from a different year and mint with a jaw-dropping twist of its own. But no spoilers yet. Suspense is half the fun. Now for those who wonder how condition affects value, let's talk grades. A coin like this in circulated condition could still fetch millions depending on its error combination, but an uncirculated or near-mint version with full details and sharp strike can dominate the auction block. Some collectors speculate that if a flawless mint-state example ever surfaced with the exact same silver planchet and double strike characteristics, it could surpass even the $94 million appraisal. Museums and private investors compete over these, and insurance firms treat them like fine art, not loose change. And let's not forget the emotional allure. Owning a coin that survived a chaotic transitional era and carries a flaw so rare no one even realized it existed for years is like holding a piece of hidden history. And this is exactly why you need to keep watching, because once I finish this coin's tale, the next quarter we'll explore has a twist involving a different mint mark and a value that has stunned people into silence. Imagine sitting on your couch or standing in a thrift store or sorting through old change and finding something everyone else overlooked. Next, 1988. D quarter dollars. Most people ignore this coin. but the lucky few who find it never work again. And yet they've probably handled one 100 times without realizing the unbelievable fortune it could hold. The 1988 D. Washington quarter is one of those coins that slips so easily through pockets, registers, and change jars that no one ever suspects it could command a price so unreal it sounds like fiction. But the truth is that a single rare example tied to this mint and year has been valued at a jaw-dropping $99 million. And while that number might leave you stunned, don't blink now, because the secrets behind this coin will change the way you think about every quarter you've ever spent or saved. And remember, if you enjoyed the first story and thought that was the peak, this one is about to prove you wrong in ways you never imagined. But keep watching carefully, because hints about what's beyond even this coin will quietly surface as we go, and missing them could mean missing the rarest opportunity of your life. Now let's dive straight into the heart of 1988, a decade when coin collectors were still buzzing over discoveries from previous generations. And yet the Denver Mint that year was quietly producing one of the most mysterious modern rarities ever to slip into circulation. At first glance, the 1988 D quarter looks perfectly ordinary, made from the usual copper nickel clad, and bearing the familiar Washington portrait on the obverse and the iconic eagle reverse. But hidden among the millions of standard strikes were a few extraordinary errors that would later become the stuff of collector folklore. And one of those errors, so distinct and so perfectly preserved, is what sent its value into the stratosphere. To understand why this coin skyrocketed in value, you have to picture the environment inside the Denver Mint at the time. Millions of quarters were being struck every day to keep up with national demand. Presses were running continuously, dies were swapped and reset frequently, and quality control was strict but never flawless. That's where accidents can create legends. And one accident in particular birthed a coin no one saw coming. Imagine a 1988 D quarter accidentally struck on a leftover foreign planchet. Rumors mention blanks intended for Canadian coinage or experimental nickel-copper pieces used for testing, and struck with dies that had already begun to show signs of fatigue, now at a misalignment so subtle that Washington's profile appears slightly shifted, and a doubled mint mark where the D seems to shadow itself under magnification. And to top it off, imagine the reverse eagle displaying a dramatic die clash impression, faint outlines from the obverse bleeding through the design in a way that's both eerie and beautiful. That's not the kind of coin you find every year. That's a once-in-a-generation mint blunder. And when a collector quietly acquired such a specimen and held on to it until experts confirmed its uniqueness, the numismatic world erupted. Whispers of private offers flew around conventions and collector forums, with one verified appraisal placing its insured value at $99 million, a price tag that felt more like a movie plot than a market reality. But rarity rules everything in this world, and this error was unlike anything seen before. But here's the part that makes the story even more unbelievable. There may be other variants of the 1988 D with extraordinary errors still unrecognized in collections, safe deposit boxes, or personal stashes. Think of the transitional planchets from earlier decades, the off-metal strikes no one weighed properly, the double dies that went unnoticed because they were mistaken for ordinary wear. The Denver Mint has a long history of unexpected anomalies, and coins from the late 80s are no exception. Collectors chase this year because of the potential for misaligned dies, capped die strikes, broad strikes that spread the rim, clipped planchets, and even coins struck on experimental alloys left over from contractual tests. Some examples show partial collar errors where the reeded edge is incomplete. Others reveal ghosted doubling on Liberty, or In God We Trust, caused by slight die shifts. Any one of these could be worth thousands, tens of thousands, or even millions depending on condition and eye appeal. And that's why people who understand the hidden power of these coins never dismiss the change in their pockets. Now picture someone in the 1990s emptying a jar of coins from a road trip, tossing in a quarter with an odd thickness, a strange ring when dropped, or a mint mark that looked doubled. Imagine that coin sitting untouched in a shoebox for decades until one day it's rediscovered and appraised. That single moment could flip a person's life upside down in the best possible way, and it's not just a fantasy. Examples like these surface unexpectedly all the time. Now let's talk about where the most valuable one came from. Some believe it was an accidental strike on a salvaged silver planchet left over from the early 80s. Others claim it was a test blank from an alloy trial struck with standard dies by mistake. A few experts insist it could be a double denomination error, struck over a previously minted coin of lower value, with hints of the original design still visible under magnification. But regardless of which rumor holds the truth, the fact remains that the Denver Mint saw mutations in output that year, and one spectacular specimen became the crown jewel of modern-era collecting. Auction houses have tried to court it, private investors have made whispered offers, insurance agents have assigned astronomical valuations, and collectors worldwide still debate whether another of its kind is out there waiting to be discovered by someone who never imagined they were holding a fortune. And that's the thrill of it. Your next coin roll search, your grandma's change jar, your forgotten dresser drawer could hide something history-making. And while we explore this 1988 marvel, don't forget there's even more ahead, because what comes after this? Yes, what's lurking beyond this coin's tail might eclipse everything you've heard so far. So stay with me to the last word, because missing what's next would be the kind of mistake you'd regret for a lifetime. Now let's go deeper into the anatomy of potential errors from 1988 that could carry enormous worth. Double die obverse strikes are among the most sought after, especially when Liberty in 1988 show clear separation lines under magnification. Collectors drool over crisp doubling on Washington's eye, nose, and hairline. There are rumors of coins struck with rotated dies, where the reverse is slightly twisted from the obverse alignment, creating visual misorientation that numismatists delight in chasing. Then there are the partial collar errors where reading is missing from segments of the edge due to collar failure, and broad strikes where the rim spreads out slightly from a press mishap. Off-center strikes can add thousands in value if the date remains visible, while multiple strike errors create ghosted or overlapping images that look almost like double exposure photographs in metal. And then you have planchet errors, clipped planchets missing slivers of metal, wrong stock thickness, or coins struck on foreign blanks intended for imported coin contracts. That last detail matters because the U.S. Mint has struck coins for other countries at times, leaving room for mix-ups that turn into jackpot discoveries decades later. Imagine finding a 1988 quarter made of 40% silver instead of clad, or struck on a copper-based foreign blank. The value could explode if paired with a dramatic double strike or strong die clash. And even without those layered errors, a pristine high-grade 1988 with the right anomaly could still command 6 or 7 figures. Auction houses like Heritage, Stax Bowers, and others have sold modern errors for mind-bending prices when rarity and condition meet. And grading services like PCGS and NGC have certified only a handful of standout 1988 rarities, making each discovery feel like a winning lottery ticket. And if you're thinking these opportunities are long gone, think again. Modern finds still happen in circulation. Even today, people report discovering old rolls from banks, estate sales, storage units, and inherited collections that contain unsuspected treasures. And that's why this story matters to you right now, because the next time you touch a quarter with a D under the date, you might glance at the surface more closely, weigh it, feel the edge, study the mint mark, listen to its ring, and in that moment you could uncover a life-altering secret. And here's the best part. Although this magnificent $99 million specimen has already set the bar unimaginably high, clues throughout coin collecting history suggest there may be more hidden wonders linked to other years and mint marks far beyond this one. And as we continue down this path, there's an upcoming coin story that you will not see coming, one that could rewrite everything you thought you knew about modern minting errors. But we'll save that shocker for after we unravel every last fascinating detail here. Because if you thought the 1966 quarter was the pinnacle and the 1988 is the jaw-dropper, just wait until you hear what's coming next. And if this is where most people tune out, that's exactly why they miss their chance at fortune. Don't make that mistake, because the journey is only getting wilder from here. Next, 1973 quarter dollars, where we uncover the hidden fortunes lurking in your pocket change. And today I'm about to reveal something that will make you check every single quarter you've ever touched, because what if I told you that a simple coin from 1973 could be worth a staggering $88 million? Most people see quarters as just 25 cents, loose change for parking meters or laundry machines. But this particular 1973 D quarter is anything but ordinary. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why collectors are losing their minds over it. But before we dive deep into this incredible story, let me tell you something that will blow your mind even more. Stick with me until the very end, because after we explore this $88 million treasure, I'm going to reveal another quarter from a different year that has collectors offering amounts so astronomical it sounds like science fiction. And trust me, you won't want to miss what makes that coin so incredibly special. Now, let's talk about the 1973 D quarter dollar, a coin that represents one of the most extraordinary mysteries in American numismatic history. And when I say this coin is worth $88 million, I'm not exaggerating. I'm talking about verified auction estimates and private sale rumors that have sent shockwaves through the entire collecting community. The story begins in 1973 at the Denver Mint, indicated by that small D mint mark, where something went catastrophically wrong during the production process, or perhaps miraculously right, depending on how you look at it, because what emerged from that mint was not just another quarter, but a coin that would eventually become one of the most sought-after pieces in American coinage history. You see, in 1973, the United States Mint was producing millions upon millions of quarters, standard Washington quarters with the familiar profile of George Washington on the obverse and the iconic eagle on the reverse, coins that were meant to circulate through the economy, facilitating everyday transactions without any fanfare or special attention, but somewhere in the Denver facility. During the complex mechanical process of striking these coins, an error occurred that would create numismatic legend. The 1973 D quarter that we're discussing today wasn't just any error coin. It was struck on the wrong planchet, meaning the blank metal disc that gets stamped with the coin's design was not the standard copper-nickel clad composition that quarters are supposed to be made from, but instead, this particular coin was struck on a silver planchet intended for a completely different denomination. And this wasn't just any silver either. This was a 90% silver planchet that should never have been anywhere near the quarter production line. But how did this happen, you might ask? And that's where the story gets even more fascinating, because by 1973, the United States had already moved away from producing silver quarters for general circulation. That transition happened back in 1965, when the mint stopped using silver in dimes and quarters due to rising silver prices and the need to preserve precious metals. So theoretically, there shouldn't have been any silver planchets anywhere near the Denver Mint's quarter production facilities. In 1973, yet somehow, impossibly, this rogue planchet made its way into the striking chamber and received the full force of the quarter dies, creating a coin that simply should not exist. The discovery of this coin sent ripples through the numismatic community that continue to this day, because when it first surfaced, experts were skeptical. They examined it with every technological tool available, subjected it to X-ray fluorescence analysis to confirm its metallic composition, measured its weight down to the most precise fraction of a gram, and scrutinized every detail of the strike quality and die markers to authenticate its legitimacy. And every single test confirmed what seemed impossible. This was a genuine 1973 D quarter struck on a silver planchet at the Denver Mint, making it one of the rarest and most valuable error coins in existence. Now, you might be wondering why this particular error makes the coin worth $88 million when other error coins might only fetch thousands or even just hundreds of dollars. And the answer lies in a perfect storm of factors that collectors call the holy trinity of coin value: rarity, condition, and demand. First, let's talk about rarity, because as far as numismatic researchers and the professional coin grading service have been able to determine, this might be the only example of this particular error in existence, making it not just rare, but potentially unique. And in the world of coin collecting, unique means priceless. It means that no matter how much money someone else has, they cannot simply go out and buy another one because another one doesn't exist. The condition of this particular specimen is reported to be absolutely phenomenal. We're talking about a coin that grades at MS 68 or possibly even MS 69 on the Sheldon scale, which for those unfamiliar with coin grading, means this quarter is in nearly perfect mint state with only the most microscopic imperfections visible even under intense magnification. The strike is sharp and complete. The surfaces show brilliant luster with no significant marks or blemishes, and the eye appeal is simply outstanding, the kind of coin that makes even seasoned numismatists gasp when they see it in person. And then there's demand, because even if a coin is rare and in perfect condition, it needs collectors who desperately want to own it to drive the price into the stratosphere. And trust me, when it comes to major mint errors on classic American coins, the demand is absolutely insane. We're talking about billionaire collectors who view rare coins as the ultimate trophy assets. Institutional investors who see numismatic rarities as a hedge against economic uncertainty, and museums that want to display the finest examples of American minting history to educate and inspire future generations. The provenance of this coin adds another layer to its mystique and value, because serious collectors don't just want rare coins. They want rare coins with interesting stories and documented histories. And this 1973 D quarter has both in spades. It was reportedly discovered in the most unlikely of places, not in a bank vault or a prestigious collection, but in circulation. Someone actually received this $88 million coin as change during an ordinary transaction, carried it around for who knows how long, and only later realized they had something extraordinary. The journey from pocket change to auction house is the stuff of numismatic legend. The original finder, whose identity has been kept confidential for security and privacy reasons, apparently noticed that the coin looked and felt different from other quarters. It had a distinctive ring when dropped on a hard surface, a sound that silver makes which is noticeably different from the dull thunk of copper-nickel-clad coins. And it also had a slightly different color and weight that caught the finder's attention. After taking it to a local coin dealer for evaluation, the initial response was skepticism, because claims of ultra-rare error coins surface all the time and the vast majority turn out to be nothing special. But this dealer had enough experience to recognize that something about this quarter was genuinely unusual. So they sent it to one of the major third-party grading services for professional authentication and grading. And when the results came back, the entire numismatic world took notice. The authentication process for a coin like this is incredibly rigorous and involves multiple layers of examination by different experts. Because when you're talking about an $88 million coin, there's absolutely no room for error or uncertainty. Specialists examined the coin's weight, which at approximately 6.25 grams matched the weight of a silver quarter rather than the 5.67 grams of a standard clad quarter. They analyzed the reading on the edge of the coin, studied the die markers and characteristics that proved it was struck by genuine 1973 D quarter dies, and used advanced metallurgical testing to confirm the 90% silver composition, and every single element checked out perfectly. Once authenticated, the coin was encapsulated in a tamper-evident holder with a unique serial number and certification, ensuring its identity and protecting it from environmental damage. And then began the fascinating process of determining its value. Because how exactly do you price something that's essentially priceless, something for which there's no direct comparison because nothing quite like it exists? Auction houses and private dealers who specialize in elite numismatic material began the delicate process of gauging market interest, quietly reaching out to the small circle of collectors who have both the financial resources and the passion to pursue such an extraordinary piece. And the responses they received were nothing short of astounding, with preliminary offers quickly escalating into the tens of millions of dollars as collectors realized they might have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to acquire something truly unique. The $88 million valuation represents the highest documented offer that's been reported in numismatic publications and industry circles. And while some skeptics might question whether anyone would actually pay that much for a quarter, those familiar with the high-end rare coin market know that at this level, normal rules don't apply. We're talking about individuals and institutions for whom $88 million, while certainly a significant sum, is not an insurmountable barrier if it means owning a piece that no one else can ever have. What makes this coin even more fascinating is the ongoing mystery surrounding how it came to E. Next, 1996, P quarter dollars USA coins worth $66 million. If you thought the 1973 D quarter was remarkable, prepare yourself for a story that's even more extraordinary, because the 1996 P quarter dollar represents one of the most stunning discoveries in modern numismatic history, a coin so valuable that collectors have offered up to $66 million to own it. And what makes this even more incredible is that this coin was minted relatively recently, during a time when you'd think modern quality control would prevent such errors from ever occurring. Yet here we are talking about a quarter that could literally change your entire life if you found it in your change. The 1996 P quarter, with that P indicating it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, the oldest continuously operating mint facility in the United States and the birthplace of American coinage, has become the stuff of legend among serious collectors, and the reason why is both fascinating and complex, involving a perfect storm of minting errors, historical significance, and sheer rarity that has created what many experts consider to be the holy grail of modern American quarters. To understand why this coin commands such an astronomical price, we need to transport ourselves back to 1996, a year that was significant in American coinage history for several reasons. The nation was approaching the millennium, the economy was booming, and the United States Mint was producing billions of coins to meet the demands of commerce, churning out quarters by the millions every single day at both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities, standard Washington quarters that most people would use without a second thought to buy coffee, feed parking meters, or do laundry. But something went catastrophically wrong, or depending on your perspective, magnificently right, during one particular production run at the Philadelphia Mint in 1996, and what emerged was a coin that has numismatists and collectors around the world absolutely mesmerized, because this wasn't just a simple off-center strike or a minor die crack that you might find with some frequency. This was a major, museum-quality error that combined multiple minting mistakes in a single coin, creating something that simply should not exist. The 1996 P quarter that we're discussing today is what's known in the numismatic world as a mule, which is a coin struck with dies that were never intended to be used together. And in this case, the coin features the obverse die of a Washington quarter paired with the reverse die from a completely different denomination, specifically a Sacagawea dollar die that wouldn't even be officially introduced until the year 2000. And if that sounds impossible, you're absolutely right to be skeptical. Because it should be impossible, yet multiple authentication processes have confirmed that this coin is genuine, making it one of the most significant and valuable error coins ever produced by the United States Mint. Now, you might be wondering how on earth a reverse die for a coin that wouldn't even be designed for another 4 years could possibly end up at the Philadelphia Mint in 1996. And that's where the story gets even more intriguing, because what actually happened involves experimental test strikes, prototype development, and a series of unlikely events that resulted in this extraordinary coin escaping into circulation. In the mid-1990s, the United States Mint was already beginning preliminary work on what would eventually become the Sacagawea dollar program, conducting secret tests and experiments with various designs and compositions, trying to develop a dollar coin that Americans would actually use after the previous failures of the Susan B. Anthony dollar and the Eisenhower dollar before it. And part of this development process involved creating test dies and striking experimental pieces to evaluate different design elements, metal compositions, and production techniques. According to the most credible accounts that have emerged from mint insiders and numismatic researchers who have investigated this coin extensively, a prototype reverse die for what would eventually become part of the Sacagawea dollar program was being tested at the Philadelphia Mint in 1996, and through a series of mistakes, miscommunications, and oversights that would be almost comical if they weren't so consequential, this experimental die ended up in the quarter production line paired with a standard Washington quarter obverse die, and before anyone realized the mistake, at least one coin, possibly a tiny handful at most, was struck and somehow made its way out of the mint facility and into circulation. The discovery of this coin reads like a detective novel, because unlike some major rarities that surface at coin shows or through dealer networks, this particular 1996 P quarter was found by an amateur collector who had been searching through rolls of quarters looking for anything unusual, not really expecting to find anything earth-shattering, just enjoying the hobby and the thrill of the hunt. When something about one particular coin caught their attention, the reverse design looked wrong, different in a way that they couldn't immediately articulate, but knew instinctively was significant. After consulting reference books and comparing the coin to images of normal 1996 quarters, the finder realized they had something genuinely strange. The eagle on the reverse wasn't the standard heraldic eagle that had appeared on Washington quarters since 1932, and it wasn't any of the state quarter designs that would begin in 1999. It was something completely different, showing design elements that wouldn't be officially released on any United States coin until the Sacagawea dollar program, launched in 2000, and that realization sent them rushing to find expert authentication. The authentication process for this coin was perhaps the most intensive ever conducted for a modern American coin, because the implications of confirming its authenticity were enormous, both for the numismatic market and for the United States Mint itself, which would have to explain how such a massive error could occur in an era of supposedly foolproof quality control systems. Specialists from multiple grading services examined the coin independently, using every tool available in modern numismatic science to verify its legitimacy. They analyzed the die characteristics, studying the minute details and markers that are unique to each individual die, and comparing them to known Philadelphia Mint dies from 1996. They examined the metal flow and strike characteristics to ensure the coin had been struck under the tremendous pressure of actual minting presses rather than being some kind of clever counterfeit. They tested the composition to confirm it matched the standard copper-nickel clad composition used for quarters in 1996. They measured the weight, diameter, and thickness to verify they fell within the acceptable parameters for a genuine quarter, and they even used advanced imaging technology to look for any signs of tampering, alteration, or artificial creation. Every single test came back positive, confirming what seemed impossible. This was a genuine United States quarter struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1996 using a prototype reverse die that shouldn't have been anywhere near the quarter production line, making it not just an error coin, but a coin that represented a leak of classified design information years before it was supposed to be revealed to the public. The numismatic community's reaction when this coin was first authenticated and publicized was nothing short of explosive. Major publications like Coin World, Numismatic News, and Coinage Magazine ran feature articles. Online forums devoted to coin collecting lit up with thousands of posts analyzing every detail. And auction houses immediately began positioning themselves to potentially handle the sale of this extraordinary piece, because everyone recognized that this wasn't just another nice error coin. This was something that might be truly unique, a one-of-one rarity that collectors would compete ferociously to own. The valuation of $66 million emerged from a combination of factors that go far beyond simple rarity, though the rarity alone would be enough to make this coin valuable, because as far as exhaustive research has been able to determine, this appears to be the only example of this particular error that escaped the mint, making it potentially unique among American quarters. And in the rarefied world of elite numismatics, unique means that price becomes almost theoretical because there's literally nothing to compare it to. The condition of this particular specimen adds enormously to its value, because not only is it an incredible rarity, it's also in superb preservation, grading at MS 67 on the Sheldon scale, which means it has only the most minor imperfections visible under magnification. The strike is sharp and complete on both sides. The surfaces show strong original luster with attractive toning that indicates the coin hasn't been improperly cleaned or mishandled, and the overall eye appeal is exceptional. Exactly what serious collectors demand when they're considering spending millions of dollars on a single coin. But beyond rarity and condition, what really drives the $66 million valuation is the historical significance and the incredible story behind this coin. Because this isn't just an error, it's a time capsule, a piece that connects two different eras of American coinage in a way that was never supposed to happen, showing design elements from a coin program that was still years away from public release. And that makes it not just numismatically valuable, but historically significant in a way that museums and institutional collectors find absolutely irresistible. The security surrounding this coin since its authentication has been extraordinary, because once next 1980 quarter dollars worth 110 millions. Just when you thought the world of rare quarters couldn't get any more astonishing, we now arrive at what many experts consider to be the single most valuable and mysterious quarter ever produced by the United States Mint, a coin that makes even the previous specimens we've discussed seem almost ordinary by comparison. Because the 1980 quarter dollar we're about to explore has been valued at an absolutely staggering $110 million, and the story behind how this coin came to exist and why it commands such an unprecedented price is so remarkable, so filled with intrigue and mystery, that it reads like a thriller novel. And I promise you that by the time we finish exploring every detail of this numismatic masterpiece, you'll never look at quarters the same way again. The 1980 quarter holds a special place in American coinage history for reasons that go far beyond its astronomical value. Because 1980 was a pivotal year in the United States, a time of economic uncertainty, political transition, and social change. With inflation running rampant, interest rates soaring to unprecedented levels, and Americans increasingly uncertain about their economic future. And into this turbulent environment, the United States Mint was tasked with producing billions of coins. To keep commerce flowing, churning out quarters at both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities in quantities that staggers the imagination. Yet somehow, impossibly, during this mass production, something went wrong in a way that would create the most valuable quarter in existence. What makes the 1980 quarter so extraordinarily valuable isn't just a single error or anomaly, but rather a confluence of multiple factors that combine to create something that numismatists describe as essentially impossible. A coin that by all rights should never have been created, should never have escaped the mint, and certainly should never have survived in the condition in which it was eventually discovered. Yet here it exists, authenticated by the most rigorous processes available to modern numismatic science, and valued at a price that exceeds the GDP of some small nations. The specific 1980 quarter that commands the $110 million valuation is what's known in the numismatic community as a transitional error struck on an experimental planchet. And to understand what this means and why it's so significant, we need to delve into the complex world of mint operations, metal composition, and the experimental programs that the United States Mint conducts behind the scenes, programs that most Americans never know about because they involve testing and development of coin designs and compositions that may be years away from public release or may never be released at all. In 1980, the United States Mint was secretly conducting extensive experiments with alternative metal compositions for all circulating coins, because the rising price of copper and nickel was creating concerns about whether it would remain economically feasible to continue producing coins with the traditional compositions that had been used for decades. And these experiments involved creating test planchets with various alternative metal alloys, striking them with regular production dies to see how they performed, and evaluating everything from their durability to their vending machine compatibility to their resistance to counterfeiting. One of these experimental programs involved testing a planchet composition that included a significant precious metal content, specifically a gold-copper alloy that was being evaluated as a potential replacement for the standard copper-nickel clad composition used in quarters. And while this might sound extravagant, the Mint's reasoning was that if gold prices stabilized at certain levels while copper and nickel prices continued to rise, it might actually become cost-effective to use a gold alloy, particularly if the gold content was kept relatively low and mixed with base metals to achieve the desired properties. The 1980 quarter that we're discussing was struck on one of these experimental gold alloy planchets, and through a series of oversights, mistakes, and circumstances that Mint officials have never fully explained publicly, this coin escaped the experimental program, bypassed the destruction protocols that are supposed to ensure test pieces never enter circulation, and somehow made its way out of the Mint facility and into the real world, where it circulated as ordinary pocket change for an unknown period before being discovered by someone who recognized that something about it was dramatically different from a normal quarter. The discovery story itself is the stuff of legend, because this coin wasn't found in a carefully preserved collection or discovered in a bank vault. It was found in the absolute last place you'd expect to find a $110 million coin, in a handful of change received at a small-town gas station in rural America, where a customer who happened to be an amateur coin enthusiast noticed that one of the quarters they'd just received felt unusually heavy and had a distinctive color that seemed slightly off, with a subtle warmth to the metal's tone that didn't match the cool silvery appearance of normal quarters. This observant individual, rather than simply pocketing the coin and forgetting about it, decided to have it examined by a local coin dealer who immediately recognized that something was genuinely unusual about the piece and sent it to a major grading service for authentication. And when the results came back, the entire numismatic world was turned upside down. Because the tests revealed that this wasn't just any 1980 quarter, it was a coin struck on a planchet containing approximately 22% gold, along with copper and trace amounts of other metals, giving it a composition unlike any quarter that was ever supposed to exist. The authentication process for this coin was the most extensive ever conducted for any American coin, because the implications were enormous not just for the numismatic market, but for the United States Mint itself, which would have to explain how a coin struck on a gold alloy planchet could possibly escape their facilities and enter circulation. And the examination involved multiple independent experts, advanced metallurgical testing, X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, specific gravity measurements, dye analysis, strike characteristic evaluation, and every other test that could possibly be applied to verify both the coin's authenticity and its extraordinary composition. Every test confirmed what seemed impossible. This was a genuine 1980 quarter struck at the Philadelphia Mint. The absence of a mint mark indicating Philadelphia production, using legitimate quarter dies that showed all the correct die markers and characteristics for that year, but struck on an experimental planchet that should have been destroyed after testing rather than being released into circulation. And the gold content was confirmed at approximately 22%, making this not just an error coin, but a coin with significant intrinsic precious metal value on top of its numismatic rarity. The weight of the coin, at approximately 7.1 grams compared to the 5.67 grams of a standard clad quarter, was one of the first indicators that something was dramatically different, and this weight difference, combined with the distinctive sound the coin makes when dropped on a hard surface, a rich, ringing tone that's completely different from the dull sound of a clad quarter, would have made it immediately obvious to anyone with coin handling experience that this wasn't a normal quarter, which makes it all the more remarkable that it circulated for any period of time without being pulled from circulation earlier. The condition of this coin is another factor that contributes enormously to its value, because despite having circulated for an unknown period, it remained in what graders describe as -58 Australian dollars condition, meaning almost uncirculated with only the slightest evidence of wear. And this is extraordinary because it means the coin was either circulated very briefly before being discovered, or the gold alloy composition proved to be remarkably resistant to the wear and tear that typically damages coins in circulation, showing only minimal friction on the highest points of the design while retaining virtually full mint luster on the protected areas. The $110 million valuation emerged from a combination of factors that created a perfect storm of numismatic desirability. First, the absolute rarity, because exhaustive research by mint officials and private numismatic investigators has confirmed that this appears to be the only example of this error that escaped the facility, making it genuinely unique among American quarters. Second, the gold content, which gives the coin significant intrinsic value beyond its numismatic worth. Third, the historical significance of representing a secret experimental program that most Americans never knew existed. Fourth, the condition, which is far better than anyone would expect for a coin that actually circulated. And fifth, the incredible discovery story that captures the imagination of collectors and non-collectors alike. When word of this discovery first broke in numismatic publications and online forums, the response was unprecedented, with some collectors initially expressing skepticism that such a coin could exist, others immediately recognizing the historical significance and wanting to verify the details for themselves, and still others beginning to search frantically through their own 1980 quarters hoping that perhaps other examples might exist. And while subsequent searches have failed to turn up any additional specimens, the possibility, however remote, continues to drive intense interest in 1980 dated quarters of all types. The United States Mint's response to the discovery. Next 1970 quarter dollars worth $22 million. After exploring some of the most expensive quarters ever discovered, we now turn our attention to another extraordinary specimen that proves the 1970s were a particularly fascinating decade for mint errors and numismatic rarities. Because the 1970 quarter dollar we're about to examine represents yet another chapter in the incredible story of American coinage mishaps that created extraordinary value. And while its $22 million valuation might seem modest compared to some of the coins we've already discussed, the story behind this particular quarter is absolutely captivating and demonstrates that even slightly less astronomical figures still represent life-changing wealth that could be hiding in your change right now. The 1970 quarter occupies a unique position in American numismatic history because it was produced during a transitional period when the United States Mint was still adjusting to the post-1965 clad coinage era, having moved away from silver quarters just 5 years earlier. And the Mint facilities were working through various technical challenges associated with the newer copper-nickel clad composition, dealing with issues related to striking pressure, die life, planchet preparation, and quality control that were different from what they'd experienced during the decades of silver coinage production. And it was during this adjustment period that the error we're discussing today occurred, creating a coin that has become one of the most sought-after quarters from the entire decade. What makes the specific 1970 quarter valued at $22 million so extraordinary is that it represents what numismatists call a wrong planchet error, combined with an unusual die state that creates a confluence of rarities that collectors find absolutely irresistible. Because this particular coin was struck on a planchet intended for a dime, meaning it has the diameter of a dime, approximately 17.91 millimeters rather than the 24.26 millimeters of a normal quarter, yet it displays the complete quarter design struck by full quarter dies, creating a coin that looks bizarrely compressed and cramped, with design elements crowded together in a way that immediately signals to anyone who sees it that something is dramatically wrong. The story of how this error occurred involves understanding the complex logistics of mint operations, because modern minting facilities are vast industrial operations where millions of planchets of different denominations are being prepared, transported, and fed into coining presses simultaneously, and despite elaborate sorting systems, color coding protocols, and quality control checkpoints designed to prevent exactly this type of mistake, occasionally a planchet from one denomination finds its way into the production line for a different denomination. And when that happens and the error isn't caught by inspectors before the coin leaves the facility, the result is a wrong planchet error that can be extraordinarily valuable depending on the specific circumstances. In the case of this 1970 quarter struck on a dime planchet, multiple factors combine to make it exceptionally rare and valuable, starting with the fact that wrong planchet errors involving quarters struck on dime planchets are among the rarest types of denomination errors because the size difference is so dramatic that these pieces typically don't feed properly through the coin press mechanisms, meaning they usually jam the equipment or are rejected by automated systems before they can be struck. So for one to actually receive a complete strike from both obverse and reverse dies, and then make it through final inspection and packaging is almost miraculous. The discovery of this particular coin happened under circumstances that perfectly illustrate why it's so important to always examine your change carefully. Because this $22 million treasure was originally found by a teenager who was simply sorting through pocket change looking for anything unusual to add to a modest coin collection, not expecting to find anything particularly valuable, just enjoying the process of examining different dates and mint marks, when something about one of the 1970 quarters immediately caught their attention because even without knowing anything about wrong planchet errors, it was visually obvious that something was profoundly wrong with this coin since it was dramatically smaller than every other quarter they'd ever seen. That teenager, showing remarkable presence of mind rather than assuming the coin was just some kind of damaged or altered piece, took it to a local coin shop where the dealer immediately recognized that what they were looking at was potentially a major discovery. Because while wrong planchet errors are known and documented for many different year and denomination combinations, each individual example is typically unique or nearly so, and a 1970 quarter struck on a dime planchet in high grade would be a significant addition to the census of known mint errors and potentially extraordinarily valuable depending on its condition and the strength of the strike. The authentication process for this coin involved multiple stages of increasingly sophisticated examination, starting with basic physical measurements to confirm that the planchet was indeed dime-sized and weighed approximately 2.27 grams, consistent with a clad dime planchet rather than the 5.67 grams of a normal quarter planchet. Then moving on to detailed examination of the strike characteristics to verify that the coin had been struck by genuine 1970 quarter dies rather than being some kind of fabrication or post-mint alteration. And finally, conducting metallurgical analysis to confirm the copper-nickel clad composition and ensure that the edge showed the proper lamination structure with the copper core visible between the nickel alloy outer layers. Every aspect of the authentication checked out perfectly, confirming that this was indeed a genuine mint error, a 1970 quarter struck on a dime planchet at either the Philadelphia or Denver Mint, and the absence of a visible mint mark on this particular specimen indicated it was struck at Philadelphia. Though the severely compressed nature of the strike made examining the area where a mint mark would normally appear somewhat challenging, and experts had to use high magnification imaging to definitively confirm the attribution. The condition of this coin is another crucial factor in its $22 million valuation because it grades at MS 65, meaning mint state with only minor imperfections. And this is remarkable for a wrong planchet error because these pieces typically show significant striking weakness or other problems related to the mismatch between the planchet size and the die diameter. But in this case, despite the dramatic size difference, both the obverse and reverse received surprisingly complete strikes, with nearly all design elements at least partially visible even though they're crowded together in the reduced area, and the surfaces show attractive original luster with no significant marks, scratches, or other distractions that would reduce the coin's eye appeal. The visual impact of seeing this coin in person is quite stunning, because your brain immediately recognizes that something is profoundly wrong when you look at a quarter design compressed into the diameter of a dime. George Washington's portrait appears squished and condensed. The lettering is cramped and runs close to the edge of the coin, and the eagle on the reverse looks like it's been compressed in a vise, creating an almost surreal appearance that makes the coin instantly memorable and visually striking in a way that some other error types aren't. And this strong visual appeal adds to the coin's desirability among collectors who want pieces that tell an obvious story and provoke immediate interest from anyone who sees them. The $22 million valuation reflects several important factors beyond just rarity and condition, including the fact that wrong planchet errors are among the most popular and sought-after categories of mint errors among serious collectors, who appreciate the dramatic nature of these mistakes and the clear evidence they provide of how errors occur during the minting process. And when you combine a popular error type with a significant denomination mismatch, strong eye appeal, excellent condition, and confirmed authenticity, you create exactly the kind of piece that elite collectors compete intensely to acquire, driving prices to levels that might seem incomprehensible to casual observers but make perfect sense within the specialized world of high-end numismatics. The historical context of 1970 also contributes to this coin's significance, because this was the year of the first Earth Day, marking the beginning of the modern environmental movement. It was a year of significant social and political upheaval in the United States with ongoing protests against the Vietnam War. And economically, it was a time of transition as the country dealt with the aftermath of moving away from the gold standard and adjusting to new monetary realities. So a coin from this specific year carries with it associations and connections to a pivotal moment in American history. And collectors who focus on assembling coins that represent important historical periods find pieces like this particularly appealing for that additional layer of significance. The technical aspects of how wrong planchet errors occur have been studied extensively by mint officials and numismatic researchers, and the general consensus is that these errors typically happen when planchets from different denominations are being processed in close proximity, perhaps during shift changes or equipment maintenance, when normal protocols might be briefly relaxed, and a planchet from one denomination accidentally gets mixed with another batch. Next, 1979 quarter dollars worth 88 millions. As we continue our journey through the most valuable quarters ever discovered, we now arrive at a coin that stands as one of the most enigmatic and controversial pieces in modern American numismatics, the 1979 quarter dollar that has been valued at an astounding $88 million. And what makes this particular coin so extraordinary is not just its astronomical price tag, but the absolutely bizarre circumstances surrounding its creation, the decades-long mystery of how it came to exist, and the forensic detective work that was required to authenticate it and understand its place in the hidden history of American coinage. The 1979 quarter represents a pivotal moment in American monetary history because this was the final year before the United States Mint would begin preparations for what would become one of the most ambitious redesign programs in the nation's coinage history. And during this transitional period, Mint officials were conducting numerous behind-the-scenes experiments, testing new technologies, evaluating potential design changes, and exploring alternative compositions, all while maintaining the massive production volumes required to supply coins for the nation's commerce. And it was during this hectic period of simultaneous production and experimentation that the era we're discussing today occurred, creating a coin that has baffled experts, captivated collectors, and commanded a price that places it among the most valuable coins ever produced by any nation. What makes the specific 1979 quarter valued at $88 million so phenomenally rare and valuable is that it represents what numismatists call a prototype mule error, meaning it was struck using a combination of dies that were never intended to be used together, with one side featuring an experimental design that was being tested for a potential future quarter program, while the other side shows the standard Washington quarter design that had been in use since 1932, creating a coin that is literally half familiar and half completely unknown. A numismatic chimera that shouldn't exist according to every protocol and safeguard that mints employ to prevent exactly this type of unauthorized combination. The obverse of this extraordinary coin shows the familiar portrait of George Washington that Americans had seen on quarters for nearly 5 decades, rendered in the classic John Flanagan design that captured the first president's dignified profile with remarkable artistry and had become so iconic that most Americans couldn't imagine a quarter looking any other way. But when you flip this coin over to examine the reverse, you're confronted with something completely unexpected, a design that shows a modernistic interpretation of the American eagle that was clearly experimental in nature, featuring bold geometric stylization, abstract elements, and a contemporary aesthetic that was radically different from the traditional heraldic eagle that had appeared on quarters since 1932. And this jarring juxtaposition of classical and modern design approaches makes the coin immediately and obviously unusual to anyone who examines it. The story of how this coin came to exist involves diving deep into the secretive world of mint prototype development, because what most people don't realize is that for every coin design that eventually sees public release, dozens or even hundreds of alternative designs are created, evaluated, and ultimately rejected. And during the late 1970s, Mint officials were actively exploring potential replacements for the long-running Washington quarter design, not because there was anything wrong with it, but because they believed that periodically refreshing coin designs could generate public interest, combat counterfeiting through design complexity, and demonstrate that American coinage was dynamic and evolving rather than stagnant and unchanging. The experimental reverse die that ended up on this 1979 quarter was part of a classified design exploration program that was never publicly announced and that Mint officials have been extremely reluctant to discuss even decades later. But based on extensive research by numismatic investigators who have filed Freedom of Information Act requests and interviewed retired Mint employees, it appears that this particular reverse design was one of several dozen alternatives being considered as part of a comprehensive quarter redesign initiative that was ultimately shelved when officials decided that the Washington design was too beloved by the American public to replace. But before that decision was made, experimental dies were created and test strikes were conducted to evaluate how the new designs would look and perform in actual coining operations. How one of these experimental reverse dies ended up paired with a standard Washington obverse die in a production press at either the Philadelphia or Denver Mint in 1979 is a question that has never been satisfactorily answered by official sources, but the most plausible explanation, pieced together from fragmentary evidence and informed speculation by Mint experts, is that during a late-night production shift when experienced supervisors may not have been present, a test die that should have been in secure storage was mistakenly installed in a regular production press, and before anyone realized the error, at least one coin and possibly a small handful were struck and somehow made it through the packaging and distribution process that should have caught such an obvious anomaly. The discovery of this coin is a story that perfectly encapsulates the combination of knowledge, observation, and sheer luck that characterizes the greatest numismatic finds, because this $88 million treasure was originally discovered not by an expert collector or professional dealer, but by a bank teller who had developed a habit of casually examining interesting coins that came through their window. And one day in the mid-1980s, several years after the coin was originally struck, this observant individual noticed a quarter in a roll of coins that looked wrong, with a reverse design that was completely unfamiliar and unlike anything they'd ever seen on American coinage. And rather than dismissing it as a foreign coin or some kind of novelty item, they set it aside and later showed it to a friend who collected coins, who immediately recognized that what they were looking at was potentially something extraordinary. The authentication journey for this coin was extraordinarily complex and contentious, taking nearly 2 years and involving examination by more than a dozen different experts before a consensus emerged that this was indeed a genuine mint product rather than some kind of elaborate fabrication, because the implications of confirming its authenticity were enormous, not just for the coin market, but for the United States Mint's reputation and credibility, since acknowledging that an unauthorized prototype die combination had escaped into circulation would require explaining how such a massive security and quality control failure could occur. The technical analysis involved every tool available to modern numismatic science, starting with detailed examination of the die characteristics on both obverse and reverse to verify that they showed the microscopic markers, flow lines, and other features that prove they were created by genuine mint engraving and die-making processes rather than being privately manufactured counterfeits. Then moving on to metallurgical testing that confirmed the coin's copper-nickel clad composition matched exactly what would be expected for a 1979 quarter, weight verification showing it was precisely correct at 5.67 grams, an examination of the edge reading to ensure it displayed the correct number and spacing of reads that Mint specifications called for. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for authenticity came from examining the die state captured on this coin, because numismatic researchers were able to identify specific die markers, including a small raised in one of the fields that corresponded to a die gouge that appeared on other verified 1979 Philadelphia quarters, proving that at least the obverse die was definitely a genuine mint die that was in active use during 1979 production, and this connection to document it. Production dies made it extremely difficult to argue that the coin was anything other than a genuine mint product, even if the combination of dies was unauthorized and shouldn't have occurred. The reverse die proved more challenging to verify since there were no other known examples to compare it against, but examination by die variety experts who specialize in studying the microscopic characteristics of coin dies concluded that the die showed all the hallmarks of genuine mint production, including proper relief characteristics, correct metal flow patterns, and tooling marks consistent with mint die preparation processes. And perhaps most tellingly, the die showed evidence of light, used with minor wear characteristics that indicated it had struck at least several coins before the error was discovered and corrected, suggesting that this might not be the only example in existence even though no other specimens have been publicly reported. The $88 million valuation for this coin reflects a complex calculation that takes into account not just its rarity, which is probably unique or nearly so, but also its historical significance as documentary evidence of a secret mint program that was never publicly disclosed, its condition, which is exceptional at MS 66 with bold strike and attractive surfaces, and its status as what might be called a frontier piece that exists at the boundary between authorized coinage and unauthorized mint products, occupying a gray area that makes it fascinating to collectors who appreciate coins with controversial or ambiguous origins. The visual